My name's Adrienne Bradshaw, and I'm helping Meredith Roberts out with moderating this meeting. And we usually give people a few minutes to log in. I see it's just touching 10:30 right now. So one of the benefits oh, here we have someone else coming in.
Excellent.
One of the benefits of the Zoom meetings is that we're recording this session, and Meredith tends to release it after sometime today or next week to be on the Parkinsons Pointe website. So we'll start. I know the meeting's being recorded now, and we'll welcome Brian into the room.
Brian, make sure you turn off your mute off so we can hear you. And that's great because people could watch this anytime they want.
That's right. It is the 21st century, right? Somebody told me.
Like that, yeah. It is. Welcome, Brian.
Oh, he's muted again. Okay.
Yeah, I know. I see. He's. That's okay. He's not. You know, if he wants to stay anonymous, he's welcome to stay anonymous. So.
Okay. This is our fourth Friday of the month, and it's our opportunity to have an educational session with Parkinsons Pointe and all the people it supports. It's also National Cherry Cheesecake Day. Just and I like to look things up like this. It's also Talk Like Shakespeare Day. So if you want to go around and say forsooth and defenestration, go right ahead.
Thank you.
You have
I like the cheesecake. I'd like the cheesecake part of it.
So our today's topic is what you need to know about applying for Social Security and disability benefits, a very timely and appropriate topic. Our very special guests are Debra King and Kylan King. Both are practicing attorneys at the King Law Firm in Denver. And I'd like to introduce our guests by reading a little bio, little about their backgrounds. First, for Debra King. Debra King received her Bachelor's of Science degree in Business Management from Regis University in 1991. I am an alumna of Regis. She received her Juris Doctorate degree from the University of Colorado in 1996 and has been practicing at the King Law Firm in Denver since then. And she represents claimants in Social Security, disability, and I'm sure you help a lot of people. Just as a little introductory question, why are you glad to practice here in the Denver area?
I've always lived in Denver, number one, and so I like the Denver area. I think Colorado's a wonderful state to live in with all the changes. In Denver, where our office is located too, we have access to a lot of people potentially needing our services. We're next to a light rail. There are bus stops on every station or every corner. Many of our claimants, that's their only means of transportation. And so it's been a really good location for us, and we really enjoy working with people, and it feels like you're helping out, and I like that.
What part of, are you in the downtown area or Cherry Creek or?
We're kind of the outskirts of downtown. We're on 10th and Sheridan, and it's 5 blocks south of Colfax on Sheridan, if that kind of gives you a general idea. So we're just 5 blocks away from Colfax. And then the next major intersection is Federal. And so we're just on the outskirts of downtown Denver.
Very good.
Hey, Brian, welcome.
I'm back. Good
to have you. Good to have you.
I have 2 computers and one of them doesn't have a speaker. So I have the wrong computer.
Glad you joined us.
Yeah, thank you.
We're just getting started.
Yeah,
we just
starting.
we're introducing our guests right now, and I'd like to introduce Kylan King. Did I say your name properly? Kylan?
It's Kylan, but I answered anything close. So
Thank you very much. Kylan King received his Bachelor of Arts degree in psychology in 2006, master's degree in natural resources law in 2007, and the doctorate degree in 2010 from University of Denver. And he's been with the King Law Firm commencing in 2010 and practices in multiple areas of the law, including Social Security disability, probate, bankruptcy, and personal injury. Welcome.
thank
Yes,
you.
welcome.
It's good to be here.
Good to have your expertise.
Appreciate it.
University of Denver is one of the premier law schools in the nation, isn't it?
Absolutely very proud of that. And I think the best thing about University of Denver is they have so many practicing attorneys as adjunct professors. So you come out of it. I had 2 years of internships out of the 3 years of law school and working with attorneys at the highest level of their fields, and feel very fortunate for that experience.
Great. It's wonderful.
It is wonderful. Thank you for taking the time to present today. I'd like to ask the other people attending if they can hear the volume is okay. Send me a message if there's any technical difficulties. And with that, I will be watching the screen. But in the meantime, Debra or Kylan, do you have any do you need to present anything? Will you be showing a PowerPoint or anything like that?
No, thank you.
Okay, then I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. We're really happy to be here today. And we know Joe Miller from working with him, and so really excited for this opportunity. We're trying to give you just the nuts and bolts of Social Security disability to just give you kind of an idea of how to navigate that system. Social Security Administration has actually 2 programs for disability benefits. The one more people are familiar with is Social Security Disability Insurance, SSDI. That is a program that's based on your work credits. You work, you pay into the system, and in return, you're entitled to monthly benefits for disability, retirement, those type of things. Social Security requires that when you're applying for disability, that you need 5 years of work credits within the last 10 years from the onset of your disability. Now, they define onset as the date that you became unable to work because of your conditions. And so you could apply today and say, I became disabled in 2015. I mean, and so that would be the onset date. And then it would be 10 years prior to that that you need the 5 years of work credits. So it's a little bit complicated, but that's a system they use. And
Debra, how does that differ from other disabilities, or is that particular to Parkinson's, or?
it's for all Social Security disability. It would be different, you know, for other just outside disability programs, but and it is only for all Social Security, no matter what the condition is.
Okay.
And so sometimes people don't know about Social Security disability, or they've had a sporadic work history for various reasons, and they don't have enough credits, or the credits they have would lead to a very low benefit.
Right.
And so there's a second program, SSI, it's Supplemental Security Income, and it's needs-based. So you have to qualify not only that you're disabled, but also that you financially meet the requirements. So for an individual, 2,000 or more, if you have 2,000 or more in assets, resources, bank accounts, retirement funds, you don't qualify. For a couple, it's 3,000 or more. They don't count one vehicle and they don't count a home.
Okay.
So that helps a little. And with the SSDI, sometimes if you've worked sporadically, maybe due to health or other reasons, and your benefit is very low, maybe you get $400 a month from that program, then the SSI has a minimum of $794. So they will bring you up to that. You'll get 400 from your SSDI and then the other 397 from SSI. So the programs can work together. What we always suggest is that people go on ssa.gov, and in the left-hand, on the left-hand side, there will be an area saying My Social Security. If you click on that, it'll walk you through setting up your own Social Security account. On that account, you'll be able to see the years and the amounts that Social Security has recorded for you in earnings. And so you can make sure that they're showing all your earnings. And then they will also show, if you get disability benefits, what would the monthly amount be? If you take early retirement, the monthly amount, full retirement, and then at age 70. So that's kind of helpful in trying to plan, whether people worry, you know, if I get on disability, what if the benefits aren't enough? Do I need to plan beyond that? And so it's helpful to know.
Okay. I understand. Do you need several days? Is it a multiple step process to get one of these accounts with Social Security? Or is it like in 10 minutes you have an account with them?
Well, that varies. Social Security is trying to make it more user-friendly. The problem is in trying to protect your identity, they have collected information from credit bureaus, financial institutions. And so they ask you questions like, you have a mortgage, or you have or have had a mortgage with First Bank,
Yes.
this mortgage
Seeing a
company,
lot of
that, none of the above. And
Oh.
so sometimes their information is incorrect. And if you give the correct answer, but they think it's incorrect, they will shut you out for 24 hours.
So it's
And-
an authentication process.
Right.
Okay.
And so, but they've been trying to make it more accurate, and I think it is becoming more. After you can try again in 24 hours, it'll be a different set of questions. If that doesn't work, you can always call Social Security at their national number, and they will send you codes and get you set up. So, but hopefully you know the answers and they agree with you, and you can just be on within 10 minutes. It's possible. So after you do that, then it helps you a little bit with your planning. So I think that's a good idea to do. Now, Social Security, in looking at applications for disability, they have a 5-step process. So the first step is, are you working? To them, do you have substantial gainful activity? And they define that as $1,310 a month gross. So if you're bringing in $1,310 a month or more, they will not take your application, because to them, you're fully employed. They consider that full employment. If you're still working part-time or something and your income is under that, then they take the application. So the next step is they look at your medical and mental health conditions, and they determine, are these severe impairments? And that has been a pretty minimal standard. If you do have a condition and it causes limitations in any way, they usually are pretty acceptant of that. The next,
Do you need a doctor's evaluation to get that kind of step?
you list it on the application, then they will send for all the medical records, and they will determine, based on your medical records, if they think it is a serious enough condition that it would interfere in some way with daily living or employment. So,
Deborah, in my case, I don't remember me being required to go see any of their doctors. You know what I mean? They got all our records that you accumulated and then basically handed it over to them. And we weren't required to go. I wasn't required to go to any physicians after that. Is that normal, or sometimes they will have you see someone Um, um,
They typically do have you see someone.
We do.
And yeah, I don't know why they didn't in your case, unless sometimes if the records are so complete, then they will not.
Well, it's
Or if they
incomplete.
think they have enough information, they
Right.
will not do it. But the majority of the time, they do send you to their doctors.
I remember sitting in a kind of across from a woman. I didn't know if she was a doctor or not, and she gave me that test with the in terms of the mental cognitive, and that's all I remember.
Okay.
Yes, it worked.
And was that through a private doctors, or was that someone from Social Security, or?
Yeah, I think it was someone from Social Security.
Okay,
She didn't do an examination on me or anything. She asked me some questions. She had me do that test. And then I guess they based it on that. And then, of course, the records that we gave them.
now that was probably a mental health evaluation, because if there's any claims of cognitive issues, memory issues, concentration, they probably had that evaluated through the mental health channel versus a physical channel. So that probably was an exam.
I did a psych test, a
Mhm.
couple of them earlier on. And so that might have triggered that.
That's true. Okay. And then they just were sent you just to get a report from one of their doctors. And so on our next step, Social Security has a list of impairments. So they have vision impairments, hearing, heart conditions, respiratory conditions, and then they have a list of criteria that if you exactly meet, they will find you disabled at that stage. And I'm going to let Kylan explain. They have one for Parkinson's, and there's two categories in which they could evaluate Parkinson's. And I'm going to let him give you an explanation of how that works.
Thank you. And as Deborah said, getting more specific to Parkinson's, when you're looking at the listings, it's important to recognize that the listings are the hardest element to reach to get disability through this system. The listings are very exact, and the listing specifically for Parkinson's, it's broken down into different categories. One is neurological, and I believe Parkinson's is under listing 11.02 or 11.06, and that requires documented and severe limitations in physical functioning of the arms, legs, hands, feet. And when they say moderate to severe, they mean difficulty rising from a seat, difficulty walking more than a very limited distance, difficulty using your hands to handle, grasp, do things like write and type. And this is one of those areas where when you're looking at both treatment and at the possibility of applying for disability, making sure that your doctors are fully aware and are documenting your symptoms at every visit is so crucial. That can be the difference between getting approved early on, having each of these symptoms considered to be severe impairments, and being denied based on what they would consider a lack of medical evidence. But to meet that listing, again, you do need both the severe physical and one of 4 mental criteria. It's called the B criteria. And it would be deficits in understanding, remembering, or applying information, interacting with others, concentration, persistence, and pace, and adapting to everyday life activities. And that doesn't just mean the ability to carry out functions of daily life, to feed yourself or to do basic chores, which I think is where a lot of judges, disability examiners interpret it, but it is the ability to be able to take care of yourself and adapt to changing situations, adapt to the symptoms that you're having, and be able to still function, not just in a way to maintain your daily living, but in a way that would allow you to work on a full-time basis. So that would be the listing specifically for Parkinson's. Again, the physical criteria is very difficult to meet, and they're only making it more difficult all the time. They recently changed one of the other listings that also involved impairments in the ability to use your arms and legs. And the criteria to meet those physical requirements now would be incredibly difficult for just about any patient based on the medical records that we see in this practice. There is another listing that you could meet depending on the symptoms that you're experiencing and that your doctors are documenting. And that would be under neurocognitive disorders, which is under the mental health listing, which is listing 12. I believe it's 12.02. And that requires more documentation of those 4B criteria I mentioned. So even if it's your medical records, that doesn't require necessarily psychiatric or psychological records. But if your medical records show, I'm having real difficulty with fatigue, I'm having real difficulty using my hands on a sustained basis, I'm having difficulty standing, that's deficits in pace and persistence and concentration. Fatigue affects us all, and the ability to stay focused on things, adapting or managing oneself. You can have those same things documented in your medical records. And so again, what I try and tell everyone, but I think in cases like Parkinson's where the disease is progressive, it's important to have that clear communication with your doctors, counselors, anyone who's treating you. We live in a world, as we're doing this over Zoom, where so much is automated, and medical records are no different. In the last decade, I think Debra and I have seen medical records go from extremely detailed, sometimes illegible, but detailed handwritten notes for each visit to a short typewritten paragraph followed by physical exam notes or other categories that are often populated. So unless you're very clear, your symptoms may not be listed. They may have you down as having normal gait, which is how you walk. You may not have that day, but because they didn't do the full physical examination, that's not what's going in your record. And this level of detail in talking with your doctors is also important in filling out the disability paperwork. Whether you...
Kylan, at this point, I'd like to ask our attendees if they have any questions for you. This information is so vital. Feel free just to either message or hop onto the video and ask questions. This is such valuable information.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and I talk a lot, so anyone out there, feel
that's
free to
okay.
jump in and interrupt me with the question.
You have important things to say.
That's why we have you here today. I do have a question, and mine is that I received a fully favorable decision by the judge, along with Debra's help. My question is, I have Parkinson's, like Brian and like Adrian, and it's not going away. They don't have a cure for it right now. They treat it, we treat it, and sometimes treatments can be very successful, and some other times they're not, and sometimes they're successful and then they're not. So it's a complicated disease. My question is, if you go through that process and you get that favorable ruling, how often do they come back to you and say, "Hey, are you better?" Or they basically just leave you alone?
So much of that depends, and it's a reason, that's the answer lawyers always give, but when you're approved, very often you'll get your approval letter and it will say, we're going to do a continuing review in 1, 3, or 5 years. The short answer is they can do a continuing review at any point. Now, obviously we're dealing with Social Security. They don't have unlimited resources to be going back and checking all of these. So the older you are, the more progressive your symptoms were at the time you were approved, the less likely they are to come back and do that continuing review. Now, once they do the continuing review as well, they really have to have documentation that not only has this treatment worked, but it has returned you to a level of functioning that would allow you to work on a full-time basis for a year. So
is it own occupancy, or is it any occupancy?
And that also depends on your age and your past work. If you're over the age of 55 and your work in the past was, say, a construction worker, very heavy, hard work, they can't come back to you and say, oh, your symptoms have improved to the point where you can do, a desk job. They are bound by rules of disability, and these are called the medical vocational rules, where the older you get, when you're 50, you're approaching advanced stage. 55 is closely approaching advanced stage. They can't, and if you don't meet a certain what's called exertional capacity, which is very heavy work, construction worker, to very sedentary work, attorney, sitting around, they can't just say, oh, you were a construction worker, you're 57, now all of a sudden you can work in an office and work on Excel and computers and things like that. So again, very situation specific. I haven't found, with the cases I've dealt with people dealing with Parkinson's, that I've had issues with continuing reviews. I can't think of a client where they've come back and later removed benefits, but that's not to say it can't happen either. So I tell everyone continuing treatment in some form or another is always important.
Right. Agreed.
Is it important to let your doctor know that you are on Social Security disability?
If you're on it or if you're applying for it?
Let's say you get approved for the disability and they're doing, you're going to a new doctor, let's say, and perhaps the doctor who was with you when you were approved retires or moves away. And so you go to a new doctor. What should you tell your new doctor about your specific case?
If you're going to a new doctor and you've already been approved, I don't find that to be as crucial a topic of conversation with your new doctor. I think it's something you should certainly bring up, if only so that they know, my symptoms are at a point where, I've been approved for Social Security disability. However, that ongoing treatment and the medical records probably won't be affected by that knowledge. Part of the time, the more crucial, I think, element of that conversation is when you're applying for disability and having a conversation with your doctor and understanding how supportive, or unfortunately in some cases, how unsupportive they might be, because that will impact what's in your medical records. And what we found to be a very useful tool is having doctors fill out a medical source statement, which is a form created by disability using disability standards to document the limitations you have. Now, In Social Security, it's a non-adversarial proceeding. We're all supposed to be working toward the truth. It's not one side fighting against the other.
Right.
So we're obligated to turn in all medical evidence we get. If you have a doctor who, and we've had them, who is simply unsupportive of the idea of disability as a whole, that's not a form we want to give them.
I'd like to interject if I could, because this was very, I knew I was going to be in a situation with SSDI and with private insurance. So I went to my doctor at the time, and I've had several doctors, neurologists, but I would say in our initial meeting, I say, I'm looking for an advocate. I'm looking for someone who can understand that, understands Parkinson's to the degree that, they're going to support me through the process. And they get it. And my doctors have understood that. And I've always felt like they, other than the fact that they're running around so much, you can't get them to sign a piece of paper sometimes, they are very much, I've found them to be very much our advocates.
Yeah.
And I found that to be more the case with cases like Parkinson's. We have run into unsupportive doctors, but not so much, where you have a clear diagnosis and they tend to work with you more closely and see the progression of the symptoms. I agree with you that time is an issue for us all, and doctors are more and more on those time limits. We really tried to streamline the medical source statement as much as possible. And I think the earlier you can bring up the idea of them filling this out, the better, because we're not scrambling at the last second trying to get them to complete it.
Right.
And it also gives us time if they say, well, I'll write a letter. Typically, I tell them that will take more time and it will be less effective, because the form we're giving you is primarily checking boxes and writing a brief explanation, but it's putting the doctor's opinion into Social Security's language, into Social Security's restrictions. And that's really key.
Speak their language.
Absolutely. We have doctors that are so helpful, and they think or want to write a letter to help their client out. And the letter says, talks about treatment in broad terms, maybe doesn't go into the symptoms as much as we would prefer for, this area of law, and ends with the conclusion that the person is disabled. And Social Security judges very jealously guard their domain, and that the decision of disability is ours. We've had people that were found, that are on long-term disability, that were found disabled through workers' comp or the Veterans Administration. It's all different rules and regulations. And so, while that opinion from the doctor is helpful, the judges are not going to accept that as easily as they are, limitations in your hands that would limit you to only occasional handling and fingering. So for typing or writing, if you've done a sedentary desk job, that would eliminate your ability to do that job. Those are the crucial elements that get lost when letters written instead of having the form filled out. But at the end of the day, communication with your doctor for disability is so key. It really is. It's the idea that your medical records are going to be more complete, that every visit is going to have, instead of just symptoms being stable, which we see very often, perhaps they talk about, increased numbness in the hands, increased fatigue, increased tremors, whatever symptoms that have kind of gone up in either intensity or frequency. That's something that's hard for disability to look at and say that's not a severe impairment.
I have a question, Kylan and Deborah. How typically, what are the ways you're brought into a case? In my case, I was compelled, insurance company, where I had a group policy from my company, I was compelled by something called an offset clause, which means, so basically says very simply, you're required to go for any funds that are available to you, and that if you're approved, then they have to, they pay less. Basically, whatever SSDI would give you, it ends up going to the insurance company. But you pay, you don't, it doesn't change your life because you're getting the same amount. At least in my case, that's what I found. That's how I came to meet you guys, through a third party also, which is something I didn't know who they were when they first came to me, and so I would like, if you could, to kind of describe what a company like that does and how they bring you to the table, and then maybe some of the other ways that you come to the table different than that.
Okay. Allsup is a company that we contract with. Allsup is essentially a nationwide group that has attorneys that handles or helps handle cases at the beginning stages. And then as you get to hearing, subcontracts the case to lawyers in that region, different regions, different judges. Debra's worked in this region long enough that everyone knows her. But we've dealt with the judges for quite a bit. So with Allsup, we tend to get brought in once you've applied for a hearing before a judge. That's the third stage.
That was the case with me. I'd gone through the initial stages in the appeal. I guess this was the appeal, right?
Yes. Now, at this point, you file the initial application, then you have the request for reconsideration, which is first appeal, and then this is the next stage, and the stage you're more typically than not approved at.
Yes.
And that's where we come in, and I think that's really the point where attorneys are necessary. And I realize I have a stake in the game, but I tell most people, I can do my own plumbing, unless you ask my wife, then that's more of a question. But it's one of those areas where when you're going before a judge, you want to be able to speak the judge's language. You want to be able to converse and say, these records right here meet the listings. The next element of that is, at a hearing, you'll have a vocational expert, which is someone who will talk about the work you've done in the past and then take the limitations and say, these are jobs that this person maybe could do. Again, I think it's very helpful to have an attorney to be able to cross-examine that vocational expert, because most clients aren't aware of the materials that these people use. The Dictionary of Occupational Titles, which is an incredibly outdated encyclopedia of every job in the country. We still have an elevator operator in there. But
wagon wheel maker.
It wouldn't shock me. But those are the areas where it's very useful to have an attorney. Now, Debra and I, through word of mouth, past clients, our own advertising, do have people come to us locally, and we help them from the very beginning. We file the application, we help with the initial forms that are sent out. The function report and work history are two of the most common sent by disability at the initial stages. And so we work cases at pretty much every level. I even handle appeals. If you are denied at hearing, you can file an appeal with the appeals council. If you're denied there, you can file a civil case in federal district court. And I handle cases up to that level. So for us, it very much depends on, Allsup. When people go through Allsup, and it tends to be through long-term disability where you're required to file for Social Security. We step in at the request for hearing stage, but we can be brought in at pretty much any stage, depending on the client in the case.
I'm not familiar with Allsup.
No, I was not, neither was I, Adrian, but I will say that they're kind of a clearinghouse in a way. I mean, they have these elaborate questionnaires that that as you're filling them out, it seems like you've answered the same question 40 times, but it's very well organized. And I found them, I could contact them if I had a question, and it just takes time. It's not hard to do, but it's much more user-friendly interface than if Social Security was designing it. So it was that, I think that was part of the positive experience, because then I was connected to Debra, and that made a difference.
And we've seen other kind of, and I think clearinghouse is probably a pretty apt description, honestly. We've seen other national firms, clearinghouses, operations like Allsup that are not as responsive to clients, that don't do the questionnaires and don't provide some of the help in filling out the initial reports. I think Allsup really is good for that. We send out very similar questionnaires to them, and having that repetition in answering, it drives people nuts, and I understand that, but it's very helpful for us in getting an idea of, what keeps coming up, what treatments, are you repeating, what symptoms are you mentioning that are getting worse. That affects the way we help everyone fill out the paperwork and the way that we prepare to present a case. And I do think Allsup does a great job in those initial stages.
Yeah, I was impressed.
That's
And I
good.
will add, I will add also that we get a lot of referrals from mental health centers, clinics, Bayard Enterprises. We've developed a real rapport with all of these agencies. And so when they have clients who need help, they've been referring them. So that's another source of clients for us.
Or even Social Security themselves, if you go to a hearing and the judge is concerned about the lack of representation, they will continue a hearing and give you a list of attorneys to call.
Okay.
Again, I think a lot of people can apply on their own at the initial stage. I would go through either Allsup or an attorney personally, because you're setting yourself up for a greater chance of success from the very beginning. But I think by the time you get to hearing, you really do need an attorney, because it just gets too technical.
The hardest part in my case was I had private insurance, disability insurance, and really it was to make sure that what I gave them was complete. And I hired an attorney. This was before I met Debra, and I can't say that it was a ton of things that they did, because it was pretty organized, but I had a peace of mind. They reviewed that, the attorney really reviewed it, made a few suggestions, and gave it his blessing before we sent it in. And there were no requests for additional information. So we must have given them something that satisfied their questions.
Now, does every request for disability go to a hearing stage?
No. A lot of cases can be approved on the initial application. When you file the application, as Debra was discussing, it goes to first a local office to determine whether you meet the work credits or the income requirements, as she discussed. And then it goes to their doctors. They typically will refer you for an examination. Happens more often than not. And you can get approved at that stage. Now, we found the level of approvals at that stage to be pretty low overall. For whatever reason, even in really good cases, it's just far less likely to be approved at the application stage. But it can be done, and it really depends on the severity of symptoms. I had a case with an individual with Parkinson's, in fact, where we went to hearing and we were denied. And we discussed pros and cons of appeal, decided to simply refile, which you can do. And we were approved on application 5 months later. And this was, based on an increase in the symptoms and an increase in the symptoms documented in the medical records. So it absolutely can be done at that stage. However, it's far more dependent on your medical records. And again, we're living in a world where everything is so automated that, unless you have that communication with your doctor and everything is getting put in every single visit, your chances are lower.
Okay. And I think I heard from Debra confirm this for me, that there's a minimum level of disability payments. It doesn't depend on the number of quarters that you've worked in Social Security. You use it. Do you use a different schedule for disability than the schedule for the number of quarters worked?
Under the SSDI program, it is based on how long you've worked, how much you've paid into the system. And for disability, they even add an additional amount because they don't want to penalize you that you became disabled and don't have the opportunity to work all of those additional years. And so the SSDI is based on your work credits. And I was talking about the SSI program, which is the needs-based program. Everyone approved for SSI can get up to $794 a month.
Okay.
So that's kind of the minimum. And if your benefits from working are less than that, then the SSI can bring you up to the $794, which is pretty unusual. Most of the time I think the average benefits are around $900 to $1,000 a month. So usually if you have SSDI, the SSI won't even matter. And the SSDI amount will be different for every individual because it is based on how long you worked and how much you paid in.
Okay. And does age play a factor in any of this? Like, is there a minimum age for applying for disability, or is there a maximum age?
You cannot apply for disability once you turn 65.
Okay.
Prior to that, there are no limits. Children can apply. They would be applying under SSI because they have no work credits, unless they have a parent receiving, and they could receive under the parent. But there are no limits. It's strictly based on the medical and mental health impairments and the severity of them.
I see. Well,
And to the point, age, does matter. While there are no restriction, age typically increases your monthly payment and also increases your chances of disability because the medical vocational rules have a tiered structure in which age is a consideration. So, it's once you hit 50 and especially 55, your odds are considerably greater.
okay.
When you're working with a client on this type of SSDI case, do you typically work on an hourly basis, or is there a different structure?
And that's a great question because a lot of people have it. All Social Security lawyers work on or should be working on the same fee agreement, which is a contingent fee agreement. Any fee has to be approved by the Social Security Administration. And what most lawyers use and what we use is if we're successful, it's 25% of the past due benefits to a maximum of $6,000. And the past due benefits are, as Debra explained, let's say right now, you're saying, I became disabled in 2018, and you have medical records to document that. Social Security is responsible for paying you back to 2018 every month that you were disabled. So until the time they approve you, they will pay you that in a lump sum under SSDI or a series of payments under SSI. And that's considered your past due benefit. Attorneys don't get anything going forward. So it's lesser of 25% or 6,000. If the case results in an unfavorable decision, there is no attorney fee. It would only be the cost of obtaining medical records or any other associated costs that would be due.
Understood.
Yeah, and I haven't heard about it for a while, but there was a brief period where I think some attorneys were trying to charge an hourly or even a flat fee, and that really should not be done. So if you're going to someone who is attempting to put that fee structure into place, that isn't an attorney I'd recommend going with.
I guess it's all about the rules, isn't it? In the last few minutes of our session today, I have a little bit of housekeeping I have to do. I'd like to once again ask all the attendees if they have any questions for our distinguished guests. And do you have any words to leave with us that we could take forward regarding disability and Social Security applications?
I think the only thing I would tell people is, this is a lengthy process. It never hurts to examine your options early on. Disability, this is something people have worked for and paid into. And, this is one of those things, always consult an attorney, know your options, and, move forward with it. And I wish everyone the best otherwise.
Sure.
And we're also very open to emails or phone calls to answer questions. So if anyone has a quick question or they don't understand a concept or something, we're more than willing to talk with them anytime.
That's great. That's great, guys. Yeah, it was. I think it's too important not to have a professional overseeing it, because you fill out these forms as best you can, but there may be an interpretation of a term that could sway things one way or another, and I want to know that before I give them my truckload of paperwork. And it worked. In my case, it worked out well. One of the things I wanted to ask you guys was, not everybody has private like a disability insurance, from their company. Some do. I was fortunate that my company had it, but I don't always think people know that their benefits. They need to check their benefits. In my case, I had Parkinson's disease when we looked for the insurance, and I was fortunate that I could get a group policy because of the number of employees we had. That made all the difference in the world, So even if you don't have that benefit, ask your employer if that's something they would consider. And even though I had Parkinson's diagnosed prior to that, there was no doctor requirement of me going for a checkup because of the amount of people we had. That makes sense.
Yeah.
I am going to ask all the attendees to please give me their first and last name. I think we can, if there's no further questions, we can stop the recording here, and that way the names and other contact information won't go into the recording. But one of the things about these sessions is that Meredith Roberts asked that we keep an attendance list. So
Sure.
There's a few people I don't have all the contact information for, and I'll send you a little chat so that you could send it back to me. And with that, Debra and Kylan, I just want to thank you so much for your time. I know an hour of time in the middle of the day is so valuable, and I'm sure that you've made a difference and spread some very good information to everyone. Thank you so much.
I think that this
Thank
tape is
you.
going to be well watched, because I know I've got a bunch of emails of people saying, I can't go today, but, so I think it'll be in the library. If it'll be in the library, that'll be a great thing, so.
We really appreciated the opportunity to speak to everyone, and it's a lot of people don't know about this, so we're happy to help get the word out.
Absolutely, guys. Thank you. In my case, you guys were great, and I really, really appreciate you speaking today.
Thank you.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you. I won't end the session until I get the contact information from
No problem.
everybody, but feel free to leave. And thanks so much again.
Thank
Our
you.
pleasure.
Thank
Have a
you,
nice
Debra. Thank
day.
you, Kylan.
Take care.
Hey, Brian.
It's because I'm new and I don't have I don't know everybody's face with their
No,
name.
that's okay. Don't worry about it. You
So-
can't forget our faces, right?
Yeah, unforgettable. And there's a S. Humston enrolled, and I'm trying to chat with this person and ask if they could
Oh.
please.
Yeah, I don't see a chat window yet. Can you hear me though?
Yes.
Yes, I can. Thank you. Here we go.
Hope this was helpful to you.
It was my first introduction to it. So it's one of those things where I didn't have a lot of questions yet, but it's Sherry is the Shari.
Okay.
Sherry, if you have any questions for them, that I found them very easy to, very easy to get a hold of. So,
Oh, that's great. Are they related? I was just noticing the same last
yeah,
name.
I think that's Deborah's son.
Oh, okay.
And her dad, her husband is James King. And so it's three of them. I'm Joe Miller.
Okay. I'll hop over to that program there.
Did you
Oh.
get Brian? Oh,
I didn't have Brian's last name, so if you just send it through chat for me, and it's so helpful if I have your email address too.
I think it should be there now.
Okay. I got it. All right.
excellent.
Thank you so much. And
Certainly.
Joe, I didn't have your email either.
No problem. It's Joe, Joe,
Okay.
architect, ARCHITECT 62
Okay.
@gmail.com.
Okay.
And I just sent my email too through chat.
Okay. Got it. All right. Thank you so much. It was a
Very
great
nice to meet
session.
you.
Nice to meet you too. I'm so glad my kitties didn't interfere with.
I saw a kitty up on the ledge there, so
That's right.
he was
Yeah.
taking a peek. So, Brian,
She-
good to see you.
Good to see you, Joe.
Oh,
gotta-
by the
we
way,
need-
there's
uh,
another session on Friday coming up. I
Today?
don't have info. This coming Friday is the 5th Friday of the month, and April 30th is the date. And Meredith says that there will be another educational session at 10:30. And I'm sorry, I don't know what the topic is.
I think the website should have that information. So check it out, because these are great to, get so much information from it.
Okay. Well, it was
Brian,
a pleasure meeting all of you.
Good to meet you, Adrian. Hope to see you more.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks,
Sherry,
everyone.
I'll leave the meeting up for a few minutes here while I
Sure.
do my housekeeping.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Nice to meet you.
Thank you, Sherry.
Bye.
Brian, how are you doing?
Generally okay. Always still working through some things. I've got to get my health insurance, medical insurance sorted through.
Right.
Generally feeling pretty good most days.
Sure.
Some days not so much.
Yep.
But how about you?
I'm doing okay. I had a little rough spot where I was trying to get my medication, adjusted a little bit higher. And
Right.
I did. And since I got that adjustment, I've been good.
Are you still doing the trial where you're wearing the,
I am. Yeah, I am. They gave me another year and a half, or they gave me, I think, 2 years more. And I'm glad because I've had a few patches where I've been on pills because of, some mix up or some pump issue. And I think this is going to become much more of a standard kind of a delivery system in the near future.
right?
That, Adrian, that's a pump trial that for a carbidopa levodopa solution that runs 24/7 as opposed to taking the pills and dealing with the unpredictability sometimes of what's in your stomach.
No
Um,
kidding. I'm with you there. I
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I just last night I participated in a sleep study for the University Health Center. I was sleeping in the hospital with all these
Oh, yeah.
electrodes on my head. So we
That's
all
no
do
fun.
what we can.
Well, that's great. Yeah, everything helps. But if you do get a chance to, on the pump, it may be worth a try. I'm an advocate for it. Let me put it that way. It's made a difference for me.
Okay, I'll ask about it.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay, gentlemen, any
Thank you.
further comments? Thanks for attending and being there.
Absolutely.